All right, I think it's about time to kick off. So welcome to Giving Tuesday and welcome to our event, How Corporations Can Leverage Social Impact Strategies to Break the Cycle of Recidivism. My name is Maryse Gordon and I'm joined today by some incredible panelists who will be helping connect the dots between society, corporations, and the human capital that find their way into the criminal justice system. We're going to be discussing what we as individuals, professionals, and businesses can do to make a positive impact to these members of our community, addressing the journey with employment, perceptions in society, post-release barriers, and the role of corporations on making a positive change. So I'd like to welcome my guest, and I'll start off with Coss to introduce himself.
Well, first, thanks for having me. My name is Coss Marte. I'm a graduate participant of Defy Ventures, recently joined the board not too long ago during the pandemic, and I started this company coming out of Defy Ventures called CONBODY, where we hire people coming out of the prison system to teach fitness classes.
Great, thanks for joining us, Coss. Over to Christopher.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christopher Marte. I'm the council member-elect for District 1 in New York City, which represents everything in Lower Manhattan. So Lower East Side, Chinatown, Battery Park City, Tribeca, Soho, NoHo, and I'm also Coss's brother.
Great, and congratulations on your new appointment. Marcus, over to you.
Well, I'm Marcus Glover. Just want to wish everyone happiness and safety in the holiday season. I'm a venture capitalist, and I work to and endeavor to invest in companies like Coss Marte's, companies that are founded by people of diversity and oftentimes people who may have experienced prior incarceration. And we invest in their companies and help them to get on the trajectory of growth and success.
Wonderful. And lastly, as part of our panel discussion, we have Katie.
Hi, everyone. Katie Loeb. I'm a partner at Lockstep Ventures, actually with Marcus Glover. We invest in underrepresented founders in the health literacy, wealth literacy, education, and criminal justice spaces. So thank you so much for having us today.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us for this very, very important discussion. So before we kick off with the questions, we do have Defy Ventures President and CEO Andrew Glazier with us to introduce Defy and set the scene for the reason behind what we do, why we do what we do. So over to you, Andrew.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles. I'm really glad to be here and glad to be talking to all of you. So I'm Andrew Glazier, President and CEO here at Defy Ventures. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just walk through a couple of slides about the organization and what we're trying to do here. So stand by for that. There it is. All right. Okay, so at Defy, we like to ask a question, everybody, and just take a moment to think about what if you were only known for the worst thing you've ever done? So just take 10 seconds to think about what that worst thing was. Now imagine that every job interview you walked into, every room you walked into in general, it would look at you and say, I know that person, and I know them for this worst thing that they've ever done. Right? Think about if that was your life. Now, if you have a criminal history, unfortunately, that is a reality because your history it's in a background check. It may be on the internet. It could be in lots of places. But every time you show up for a job interview, you walk in the door and you're immediately put at a disadvantage because you are known, as soon as they run that background check, you're known for that worst thing that you've ever done. And that can be really crippling when you're trying to, if you're an individual that's trying to reenter society, you're trying to be constructive and have a positive impact on your community. So at Defy, our vision is to cut recidivism in half by leveraging entrepreneurship to increase economic opportunity and transform lives. And our mission is to change mindsets to give people with criminal histories their best shot at a second chance. Now, when we talk about changing mindsets, we're not just talking about the people that we serve who are currently informally incarcerated adults, or as we call them, entrepreneurs in training, who are striving to defy the odds. And they're striving to defy the odds of going back to prison because unfortunately, the way statistics are now, anywhere from 50 to 70% of people will return to prison after incarceration within 3 years. But we're not just talking about changing those mindsets, although that is very important. We also think about how we are changing the mindsets of people in society, and particularly in the business community. Because what we know is that one of the highest indicators of somebody returning to prison or recidivating is if they do not have a job. And so if we have a business community that's unwilling to hire people with criminal histories, we're never going to solve the problems of mass incarceration, because all these people who are headed into prison, when they come home, we put them on a revolving door back into the justice system. So this is a really significant social issue, probably one of the most significant social issues of our time at this point, and it cuts across economic justice and racial justice and social justice. And it impacts a lot of people. So a couple little statistics. There are as many Americans with criminal histories as four-year college degrees in our country. And women are not excluded from this. Women are one of the fastest growing demographics within prison. Unfortunately, a lot of women are being incarcerated. I think our system right now is about 10% women, but that number is growing as a proportion. The justice system also very much disproportionately impacts people of color. If you are Latinx, you're almost 3 times as likely, and if you're Black, almost 6 times as likely to be incarcerated. In general, about 1/3 of our country has a criminal history by the age of 23, regardless of race or gender. This is not cheap. So we are spending lots and lots and lots of money on this. It's not just the loss of human capital, the loss of lives, the disruptions to families, the generational cycles, but it has a tremendous cost of our national economic resources to keep people incarcerated, and not just to put the number of people away that we put away, but also the length of time for which we keep people incarcerated. So it's not just mass incarceration, it's also over incarceration, for different crimes and the disparity in sentencing that happens, but people who are staying in prison, for a long time. And then when they don't receive services or the rehabilitative programming to prepare them for the return, and then if we aren't building up those support systems when they come out, enabling them to be productive members of society by having jobs, this is where this $182 trillion of cost is coming from. Now, the average cost to keep somebody incarcerated for a year is almost $80,000. And that's an average across all the different markets, all different states where Defy serves. And that's because you've got, that's people returning to prison, spending 1 year in prison per person. Now at Defy, we're running a program which has vastly better success rates in terms of people returning to prison. So the average rate of the 1 year is 30% return to prison, at 5 years, 50%. Our average return to prison rate after 1 year is less than 10%. And we're doing that for about $5,000 per person. For our prison program, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute, it's about $1,500. And that post-release program, which continues when they come home, is about $3,500 in cost. It is vastly less expensive for us to be providing programming and services for people than it is to do nothing and allow them to return to prison. So the Defy program that we run primarily starts inside prison, in custody or in transitional facilities. And we teach, we have an entrepreneurship themed program that is really equal parts entrepreneurship, employment readiness, personal development, and reentry preparation. And so we have, it's about a 7-month program, not easy. The people who go through the program are working 10 to 15 hours a week. And at the end of it, not only have they created a business concept that they pitch to volunteers, and we bring a lot of volunteers in with us, and we do look to bring volunteers from the business community inside, but they've also developed a resume and a personal statement, and they've gone through a significant amount of personal development, self-work, and career readiness. Once they come out, we continue those services with additional support on employment readiness. We give everybody a Chromebook when they come home and provide training for that, as well as providing a pro-social community. And if they'd like to continue to work on their business, which a percentage of them do want to continue with that business, and we can help them with that. Many of them are just looking for a job. And so that's where we look to find partnerships with the business community to be able to support that employment pathway. So we are making an impact. We think our program is showing some significant success. As I mentioned, we've had a less than 10% recidivism rate. That's return to prison after 1 year. Even during the COVID pandemic, we saw an employment rate of about 80%. Pre-COVID, we were about 84%. We continue to incubate businesses. And we continue to engage a lot of volunteers. We've been engaging volunteers virtually, but we are restarting some of the in-prison programming. We just had an event with about 30 volunteers in Illinois. And this coming year, we hope to enroll about 1,000 entrepreneurs in training, or EITs, across our national network. So again, getting back to where does the business community come in? Well, the fact is that if you have a criminal conviction, right, your odds of getting a job are significantly reduced. In fact, a 2009 Justice Department study said that your odds were 50%. And that is even more so if you're a person of color. But again, what we know is that if we can help individuals coming home from prison to have employment and find stability and sustainability, they're far less likely to return to prison. And then for those of you who are thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging plans, I'd encourage you to think about this question of where does justice involvement fit into your plan? Because the fact is that if people are deeply over-indexed, people of color deeply over-indexed in the justice system, and you have goals to try to include more people of color in your employment pool, you are excluding many, many people of color who have criminal histories. If 50% of, or if Black men are 6 times more likely to have a criminal history than white people, then they are 6 times less likely to be hired by you if you have policies that are excluding people who have criminal histories. And so it's really important, we believe, for the business community to be looking at this issue and thinking about how can they intentionally be incorporating this idea of what are our policies around hiring, employment of people with criminal histories. How can we be intentional about including them in our company? Because without that, you're leaving a lot of talent on the table, and you're certainly excluding a lot of people, particularly people of color. So I'm going to stop there, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to kick it back to Maryse, and I look forward to seeing what else you have to talk about today.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thanks for that insightful information. So let's kick off with our first segment. This is about understanding how do people find themselves embedded in the criminal justice system. So we often hear about the revolving prison doors, the generational impact of incarceration, and the stigma and barriers to entry when it comes to a criminal record. So Coss, I'm going to start off by asking you first what you think about the phrase pipeline to prison.
So I believe the pipeline to prison starts from, there's been studies that say from 3rd grade, people are already being graded and told and molded to being incarcerated individual. I believe the pipeline starts very early on with the lack of resources someone has. I remember when I was going to school, I definitely didn't have the resources that anybody else had. If I were living in a different zip code, a different area, I could say probably 80% of the people I went to school with ended up in the justice system. I remember when I went to high school, I had one of the highest dropout rates in the whole city. My class, my graduation class was supposed to be 500. And it was only 60 of us that graduated. And I was one of them. And I still ended up in prison. And so I believe not only the schools are molding people, society, and the lack of resources. I think that's a recipe for bringing people into a whole pipeline going inside the system.
Absolutely. Christopher, what are your thoughts on that phrase?
I completely agree with what Coss said. 80% of people in Rikers Island right now don't have a high school diploma. So just think about how likely you're gonna end up there if you can't finish your high school program. And when you actually look at the population of Rikers Island, 55% of those people have learning disabilities. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people don't even know that they have learning disabilities like dyslexia when they go to school. And because they can't address it, because our school and our society doesn't put the energy, the resources in helping kids learn in a different way that are smart, they just have different ways of learning, their chances of going to jail or prison are extremely higher. And so it creates this, pipeline to prison for kids who live in low-income community, mostly of color, right? Like me and Coss, we grew up on the Lower East Side. A lot of our friends went to Rikers Island, went up to upstate to prison because they weren't given the attention or the resources they needed. And, Lower East Side is not the worst neighborhood. Let's say if you're from East New York or Brownsville, your percentage of being part of that pipeline is going to only increase even further. And so it just really depends where you live from, how much money we're investing in our schools, the size of our classrooms, right? Whether a teacher, even if she knows that you need additional help, can they offer you that help? So our society creates this pipeline because we haven't truly invested in early stage development, but continuing development through high school and college.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, it's very insightful to kind of hear the different roles that society and community plays in, preparing people effectively for, for prison. And Katie, I'd love to kind of come to you now and understand what you think. When you hear society and their views around the formerly incarcerated population, what do you think fuels their particular narrative, and what do you think that narrative is?
Well, first of all, I mean, I couldn't agree more with Coss and Chris here. And I just wanted to add quickly to that, especially young children of color are oftentimes labeled disruptive in their classrooms. Whereas usually young white children are given an accurate diagnosis of having ADD or ADHD. So already there's an unconscious bias there that's happening in children that we're seeing at a super young age. And I think that unconscious bias sort of feeds into adulthood. The narrative that we're typically seeing around people who have a criminal record is that, maybe they are untrustworthy or unreliable. And this is all because of, these unconscious biases that are sort of developed and internalized in all people because of this stigma that has been sort of set forward from, by our society and our culture. Something that you and I have discussed before, Maryse, is that, we see this sort of written in our literature that we're reading. We see it as in our media every single day. This is how we start to really internalize these stigmas that are, ultimately projected and ultimately fulfilled by our society. Something that I have always taken away with me, especially as I started to get more involved with Defy, is a book that I read in high school, The Scarlet Letter. Obviously, this is a novel. It's fiction, but it is illustrative of our society. And it's about, as a reminder, I'm sure a lot of people on this panel have read it, but it's about a woman who has to wear a scarlet A on her chest for the rest of her days because she was an adulterer. And this is the same thing that we're doing to the to people who have been through the criminal justice system. Effectively, we're having them, go through the punishment of being in prison, and then, punishing them again by not really allowing them to fully rehabilitate and live down the stigma that has been perpetuated. So it's an unfortunate thing that, I think that everybody needs to be really conscious about dismantling.
Absolutely. And Coss, what are your thoughts around, how society kind of gets fed information about what criminal justice really means? Like, where does that narrative come from?
I mean, the narrative has been coming from years of media. I love like the jail shows, but that's the reality that we see, and that's the reality that we think prison is. And there is stuff that happens all the time in there. You know what I mean? There is jail politics, there is fights and all the stuff that you probably see on TV, but they glamorize it and make it seem like that's every person inside the system. And for years we've been molded to think this, and see this. And I believe that we need to really change the narrative, because when you go to a Defy event, you see the smartest, you see the most charismatic, you see the most like loving people in there, and you just want to stay in prison, and to hang out with them a little bit longer. And it's something that we really need to change the narrative and highlight that. I wish we could go in there with cameras and film, the day-to-day, the reality of day-to-day, instead of like all the negativity that we see, for years. For years, when I was watching some jail shows or movies, it was like, oh, wow, this is what it is. And then going inside and experiencing myself, I've met the smartest people in there. I've met the most trustworthy people. And that's why I hire these individuals coming out of the system, because I was actually talking to my wife right before this panel, and she's like, there's people left and right that are leaving the company, and I was like, maybe you should hire more formerly incarcerated people. She works for a huge corporation, Lockstep, and I was like, my people never leave. That's the problem. But yeah, I mean, the loyalty is strong, and the intelligence is amazing. So I feel like we're working with real untapped talent.
Awesome. And I mean, talking about talent, and we're talking about corporations, Christopher, I know Marcus has just dropped off, so maybe you or Katie could add a voice to this. But again, talking about perceptions, what is the perception that you naturally see coming from corporations, for example, around this type of community? Are there fears? Are there, Coss has just talked about very talented individuals. What is that currently, what is the current perception of that? And again, how is that being fueled?
I believe it creates a modern day caste system in our society, right? Because you were formerly incarcerated, most people perceive you can only, if your company allows you to even work for that corporation, what type of job is offered to them, right? Is it just a registered job, or is it, a phone banking job? And is there a pipeline or training to develop that person? I think that's one of the biggest issues that our society perceives the incarcerated population, or the formerly incarcerated population, that yes, we can invite them, but how much can we? And as Coss said, some of the most intelligent people, just because where they grew up and what happened in their life, are being, degraded and downgraded and put a ceiling on what they can actually reach. And so there's a lot to change in that, but I feel like that's how people who work in corporation, if they even allow people to apply or hire them, they automatically put a ceiling on their potential growth.
Mm-hmm. Marcus, I don't know if you are there, you keep dropping off, but anything to add to that, again, from the corporate perspective?
I just want to apologize, having some technical difficulties on my end, but hopefully this will stick. Look, I just think in general, our corporate interests have a larger hand to play in how we create the remedies in society. You take a company like Amazon with their 300,000 employees, and I don't mean to pick on Amazon per se, but if, for example, an Amazon from its seed stage had thought about impact and created an initiative from its inception to have fair chance hiring and bring formerly incarcerated people into their workforce, you think about 20 years of, good behavior from a corporation like Amazon, it could have altered the character of our country entirely. Whereas, the men and women who were formerly incarcerated might be met with a more favorable climate in society, which provides a more of a helping hand to come back into community. And so while corporations are pretty narrowly focused on quarterly growth, can you hear me okay?
Yes, keep going.
Okay. Yeah, while we're focused on quarterly growth, we really need to encourage corporations to reach a higher ethic around how to employ fair chance hiring practices, investing in men and women who many times are the most vulnerable amongst us, and giving them a fair chance in society. Absolutely.
Well, that really leads us greatly onto the next section, which is talking about post-release barriers to entry. Much of the work that is done at Defy is about providing people with economic stability and a network to provide for better opportunities at that second chance, and breaking down all those barriers that are really faced when trying to resettle into society. So, Coss, I'm gonna come back to you, and if you could outline for us, some of the main barriers and challenges that people encounter on their release from prison. What do you think some of those are?
I mean, transitional services inside, they actually have a program that's called Transitional Services in New York State. And they literally give you a piece of paper a regular piece of paper, a ruler, and a pencil, and they tell you, let's draw out your resume. And this is what they expect you to go into a job interview with. You know, like they don't even have you type up your resume or even have an outline of what a resume looks like. You know, everything is so outdated, and the transitional services just doesn't even make sense, you know, to meet what we have to deal with when we come out. I mean, I literally went in with a MySpace account and had a flip phone when I went inside. And then I transitioned to, you know, having a touch screen, and, you know, then I figured out that, oh, there's this Instagram thing, there's a Facebook thing, there's Twitter. And then I discovered Defy that helped me, like, you know, construct a proper email and learn how to, you know, read a spreadsheet, you know. So it was a struggle to transition, and it's depressing a bit. You know, when I came home, I felt so left back, that I was deterred a little bit to not keep going. You know, you keep knocking on people's doors, you keep trying to get a job, keep trying to, you know, get an opportunity there, but when those doors shut in your face, you just get frustrated, you know. And thank God I had the family and the support and the programming that I took advantage of, but there's not enough of it, you know, and we need more of it. And so technology was a big deal for me. I think that was one of the biggest deal breakers for me when I was coming home. And you know, there's a lot of people. I mean, there's you know, people that I hire right now. I literally had an incident the other day where we're running like virtual live stream classes, and we just got this new like intern, came out of prison. He did 15 years. And so he calls me, he's like, hey, you know, something's wrong with the camera. How do I fix it? And so I'm like, go to the mouse track on the computer. And he's like, what's a mouse track? You know? And so and I was like, I have FaceTime. And he's like, you know, how do I turn on the FaceTime? So it was just, it's a shock, you know, and we take it for granted because it you know, everyday technology keeps, you know, getting in our heads, and we keep learning it really quickly. But for somebody that's been so left out and back in the Flintstone era, it's a struggle, and it's frustrating, and we need to be patient with the training that we give out. But
absolutely, yeah. I mean, technology advances so quickly. I think from one day to the next, you really can have 100 new apps and 100 new ways of interacting with people. So yeah, you are kind of left behind in that sense.
You know, Maryse, I'd love to answer Coss's thoughts. You know, on the other side of that same coin is there's never been, in my opinion, a bigger opportunity for you know, impacted men and women. You know, there's a term that's becoming more popular called the Great Resignation. You know, and things like the workforce apocalypse, the supply chain apocalypse. There's these huge gaping holes in society that can only be filled with labor. And, you know, here is an untapped resource. It's like an oil deposit just waiting to be tapped. And, you know, it doesn't take much to see the sheer leadership, charisma and charm, smarts of a Coss, Marte. And, you know, Coss is my friend. I don't think he'll be insulted by me saying Coss is one of many that I would venture to say prison may have taught them things about adversity that are important lessons in business or in, you know, the workplace. Those lessons they put to use in their careers and in their businesses. So this is not only an untapped resource, but it is an optimal audience that the corporate world should take a closer look at.
Mm-hmm. If I could also just echo that, because I think that both Coss and Marcus have mentioned the term untapped talent. If you don't have this book, Untapped Talent, I highly recommend that everyone who's watching reads this. It's going to completely change your perspective on what it means to be hiring, doing some fair chance hiring. So it's pretty phenomenal and highly recommend.
Thank you. So we mentioned technology. Katie, is there anything else that you find can be a barrier to entry for people leaving the prison system?
Of course. I mean, there's plenty. And I mean, speaking from the private corporation side, you know, I think that there's a lot of businesses that still have not really educated themselves and are a little afraid to because of the stigma of someone who has a criminal record. And then I think, you know, the other barrier to entry is that perhaps those corporations have, you know, gotten over that stigma, but now are, you know, maybe not willing to put the investment in. And it's really unfortunate, you know, as we've heard from both Coss and Marcus, some of these individuals, all of these individuals, the ones that I've met, are incredibly smart, self-aware, eager, ready to work and willing to learn. And that's the exact kind of employee that I would want to hire, someone who's passionate about, you know, getting the job done. I want some of my employees today to be that excited about it. So, you know, I think that the other thing that we really need to hope for and expect is that on the corporate side, that people are really willing to do the investment to nurture and cultivate a lot of these folks so that they can really be successful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Coss, coming back to you, we talked about some of the barriers to entry, but once you do get that employment or you do get the opportunity, you're not really out of the system, are you? You're still kind of under this constant supervision or risk of recall. So how does that affect ongoing progress, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, being on parole supervision, you're walking on tiptoes. You know, it's a frustrating transition because every time you go to parole for a visit, you're just, you know, you could be doing the right thing. I was doing the right thing day after day, waking up early, you know, and still I have the opportunity or, you know, to be sent back to prison, you know, for anything. You know, I remember going over there and taking a drug test, and I knew I was clean. I was not using anything, and I remember they took a saliva thing and it came back positive. And I'm like, no, this is impossible. I don't do anything. And they were like, well, you know, you gotta, they were contemplating on violating me. And then they redid it and I came back negative. And so it was a false positive. And so it was like, wow, if they would have just went with their first decision, I would have been back in the system right away. Mm-hmm. You know, on parole, you're not supposed to be hanging out with anybody that's been incarcerated. You know, sometimes you can't get a job because, you know, you have to work after hours, and so you have a curfew. You know, I couldn't get out of my house till 7 a.m, and I had to be inside at 9 a.m. And Chris was there. We were actually roommates when I was on parole. You know, we were living together, and he's like, yo, I'm going out tonight. And I'm like, it's 8:58. I got to be home, you know? And I was and you're just like, you living with this anxiety of like somebody watching your back. And I understand we need, you know, supervision, but, you know, why don't we have any type of supervision that gives you a transition or training to succeed? You know, everything feels like you're being punished and there's no correction behind it, you know, and it's like you did something wrong and you have to pay for your actions, and so now we have to whip you in the back. Mm-hmm. and keep whipping you. And I was stuck in the system for a very long time. You know, for 16 years of my life I was on probation, parole, in and out of prison and jail. So it was a struggle to even break that cycle, you know, and finally, you know, I broke that cycle with support systems.
Right, we lost the end of that, but I'm glad to hear that you have broken that cycle. And Christopher, it looks like you want to add a voice to that as well.
Yeah, I feel like it's still being in prison even when you're out of prison. You know, living with Coss, you could see the fear that he had with every decision he made, whether it's like someone asked him, hey, do you want to go to this event so I could like help you network with new people to invest in your business? And he would have to say no because he would be scared if he took that risk. that could send them back. And so it's kind of, we entrap people for decades, even when they come out of the system. And, you know, most people can't even deal with that additional stress when they're trying to get back into daily life and real life. And so it plays a huge burden.
Yeah. And I mean, now that you're in office, I would pose this question to you, you know, what kind of changes do you think you can make to kind of help with that transition being a lot smoother and a lot fairer? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, when you saw the initial slides, how much money we spent on keeping people incarcerated and over incarcerated, I think it's all about money. And the one thing we could do as a city council is look at city contracts and mandate that these corporations who we give millions of dollars to have apprentice programs that hire formerly incarcerated individuals to put them in a process to have good paying jobs. Right now, there are a few unions that do that now. The Carpenters Union, I believe 25% of their apprentice program are formerly incarcerated. In 5 years, these people are going to be making $120,000 full benefits, pretty much moving into the middle class. And so I think we have to mandate that for contracts across the platform, whether it's a union job, a corporation, a sole proprietor, to make sure that the money we're spending to incarcerate this keep people incarcerated, we use that same money to get people out of the system.
Absolutely.
I would love to dovetail on that. Yeah, I can't agree with, by the way, thank you, Coss, for your journey and sharing it. And we completely agree with Christopher. It's all about the money. You know, you don't get to $182 billion system a year without economic incentive for people in the wrong places. And so what we want to do is put the economic incentive on the right places. The economic incentive should be placed on backing the Cosses of the world and his ability to hire, you know, in the tens of hundreds of formerly impacted people. And so Katie and I, for example, we have an initiative with our fund, which is a fair chance hiring rider, which basically states, the old saying is, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And if we're investing in companies that, you know, studies show that for the average amount of venture investing per year, there are about 250,000 new jobs created in America that didn't exist the year before. And what if in those 250,000 jobs created each year, we made sure that a certain amount of impacted people were the recipients of those jobs? Well, that is going to guarantee lower recidivation numbers. So there's less people going back into the system. And so really, as Chris said, we've got to figure out ways to economically disincentivize, you know, this present behemoth system, and economically incentivize the path towards reentry and corrections and stabilization.
Yes, and there's actually a very good comment in here from in the chat that, you know, some corporations don't realize that they get tax benefits from hiring people with criminal records. So there's a lot of education, I guess, that needs to be done and shared amongst the corporate organizations, and how they can, you know, economically benefit, I guess, but also give back to the communities and give people a fair chance. So thank you for that comment, and we would be happy to take some questions as well. We probably will have some time at the end to do that. So any of our audience who'd love to pose a question to our panelists, please do feel free to drop that into the chat. And Marcus, that kind of leads us greatly into the last section that we want to cover, which is about stepping in as a corporation and how to make that positive impact. So it's clear that this is a very complicated and complex subject, and there's multiple layers, there's multiple players, and there's winners and there are losers in this. And between disregarding, you know, the human being and their story to the corporations and investors that actually do profit from incarceration, there's a lot that can be done to kind of break this very crippling structure, I think. And a few points that, you know, I wanted to raise is that we are seeing corporations step up, and they are looking at things like their policies and their strategies and trying to realign them to things like positive change. So whether they're looking at inequalities and looking at things like systemic practices that prohibit opportunities for underrepresented groups like Black and brown people, that's definitely happening. There's a lot of work and focus now being done in corporations regarding diversity and inclusion, and how a key corporate function that has now become aligning to things like company culture. You've also got social corporate responsibility, and then you've got things like ESG and sustainable investment and impact investing. So there's many ways that corporations can start to look at this. But I want to ask Marcus, you're very close to this side, and Katie yourself as well. What do you think is the role of the corporation, both positive and negative, when it comes to supporting this community?
Well, I think that, first of all, thank you for this conversation, Maryse, and for the listeners. It's, sort of our ability to have these campfires and create these new narratives that, Coss is re-envisioning and so many others. This is how we create change. So, thanks for our time and attention towards this. Before I answer your question, I will state that I'm slightly biased. I'm on the National Board of Directors with Coss, and Katie of Defy Ventures, I believe deeply in the work of, providing tools to impacted people. But I think one of the things that Defy does really well, in answer to your question, Maryse, is private sector engagement. Brian Stevenson said, when someone asked him, I'm white and privileged, don't have impacted people in my family, I don't know anything about this, how can somebody like me help? And he said the very famous quote, when you are proximate to the issue, that gives you the authority over the issue. If you see somebody on the side of the road with a flat tire, right, you don't need to theorize if they need help. You stop your car and you help them change that tire. And I think that's where we begin with private sector and corporate engagement, is just getting proximate to the issues, right? Katie and I just participated, and with Andrew, led a group of business executives into a prison, a medium security prison in Chicago, that I would venture to say was life-changing for, business executives from the widest swaths of society. And I think it is, being there in person and having that first person experience that is the forefront of change. My second recommendation is, I think what has frequently been absent from the DE&I conversation is the J, the JEDI, and the J stands for justice. The justice component is ameliorating past harms and past wrongs. We didn't get in this position, last night. This is a 400-year-old dilemma around race and justice in this country. And we have to start to look at the roots of the problem in order to ameliorate the harm. And it is incumbent on corporations to stand up to that ethic of being able to look into communities that have been harmed by systemic racism, communities that have been harmed by the war on drugs, and to realize that many people were harmed unfairly, right? If the Sackler family, which arguably is the face of the opioid crisis, can get off with a slap on the wrists, essentially, paying a fine and a slap on the wrist, then why are there so many Black and brown people serving long sentences for not even nearly the crimes that that one family committed? So it is the uneven hand of justice throughout the decades that has gotten us in this position. I think corporations need to acknowledge that as well.
Absolutely. And Christopher, do you have anything to add again on the role of corporations, both positive and negative?
Yeah, I mean, Marcus hit it on the head. You know, I've been meeting a lot of corporations, a lot of nonprofits before we take office just to see what they want to do. And a lot of them say, oh, we want to bring services to the community, right? They always want to bring services. And what I reply with is that, you know, that's fine, but you also have to join the fight for justice. You know, you just can't be on the sidelines when people are outside and protesting or trying to fix our education system. We're trying to figure out our criminal justice system. You have to be there with us, providing your expertise, your knowledge to improve our fight for a greater world. And so I feel like that's the conversations we have to have with corporations who have started using the right narrative or started having the right policy, but are they in the fight, helping the fight every day to make this world a better place?
Absolutely. And Coss and Katie, I want to come to you with this next question, which is around that. You know, what more can corporations be doing at this point? Coss, I'll start with you.
I mean, there's a lot that they could do. First off, I think taking a seat at the table and listening to these discussions, going to nonprofit organizations like Defy Ventures, not only contributing, but participating and asking how, you know, actually doing the work, you know, where we have formerly incarcerated and incarcerated individuals that are inside the system now, like seeking to have a better life when they come out. I get jail mail, I don't know, 5 times a week, you know, with somebody saying, you know, I've been working out in the prison cell, you know, I'm going to go work with you, blah, blah, blah. And those people have all this hope, you know, to do the right thing. But when the reality comes to play, like, I don't have enough money to hire as many people as I want, you know, and give so many opportunities. But some of these corporations have all the money in the world, you know, so for them it's a drop in the bucket, but it'll change somebody's life. And not only that person, but their families, you know, their kids, you know, so it's generational wealth that could be changed if that person just invests in somebody that's been, you know, impacted by the system. So definitely taking the opportunity to participate in these discussions, ask for like, how can they contribute, you know, and then also, you know, be in these roundtables, you know, and actually do something. So.
Great. Casey, anything to add to that?
Absolutely. I just want to echo Marcus's point, and I think that Chris and Coss touched on it as well, but getting close to the problem, seeing it firsthand will be transformative. You know, it's one thing to talk about it in sort of abstract ways, to understand it from a high level, but to do the Defy Ventures prison visit, like Marcus and I did only a couple of weeks ago outside of Chicago, I mean, it was truly transformative. It's life before, and then there's life after this experience. And you realize very quickly how humanizing this all is. You know, this is a level setting experience for everybody involved. And I think that if every executive went in to the prison system and had an interaction with some of these individuals like we did a couple of weeks ago, the perspective will be completely different. You realize immediately that, you know, everyone who you're sitting directly across from, you've had experiences that they've had, except they've been caught. And that's what that's what I've come to terms with, is that, you know, everybody is a criminal, except some people get caught and some people don't. And that's honestly, you know, for me to be able to really understand that concept on a really deep level has completely changed the way that I think about this problem. You know, I'm thinking about it in more solution-oriented ways because, you know, very easily the roles could have been reversed.
Absolutely. And there are a couple of questions in here. So one that's come in is, can you give an example of 2 big corporations or brands that have recognized the importance of second chance hiring? So Christopher, I don't know if you or Marcus, you want to take that question?
I mean, I'll start and hand it off to Chris. I'm deeply fond of the work of Graystone Bakery. Graystone is an organization which provides all baked goods for Ben & Jerry's. If you've ever had, you know, a brownie ice cream from Ben & Jerry's, those brownies are made by Graystone Bakery. And they, along with Defy, have been visionary in reimagining community, and created in many ways open hiring. So their hiring practice is simply, there's a clipboard in the lobby. You walk in the lobby, you write your name and phone number. The very next job that comes available in the bakery, they just call the next person's name on the list, and they hire them without an interview and without running a background check. On average, there's about $7,500 that is spent per employee. When we hire someone, they take that $7,500 and they put it into training. Some of the things that Coss talked about, they've got, someone in social work on staff who's there able to provide wraparound services. So if this person has experienced, formerly, struggling with drug abuse, for example, or a mental illness, there's someone on staff who can help to provide services. If there's someone who is unhoused, they'll connect you with some form of shelter. But their goal is the stabilization and health and growth of their employees, but their entire community. And it's models like that we really need to see. Corporations have that ethic of not just focused on quarterly returns and shareholder results, but the community impact and the community KPIs.
Great. Chris, I'm going to actually ask you a different question from another audience member. So this is about the availability of data for tracking formerly incarcerated people. We always hear about the negative, but is there a lot of information about those that don't return to prison and what the main factors are for driving that outcome?
There isn't, to be honest, there isn't accurate data of how people have transformed their lives. And I believe because it's a new phenomenon, right? Because we started actually having this conversation, we started investing in people so then they don't go back to prison. But this is something we can legislate and make sure that we conduct these studies every 2 years, every 5 years, to help promote the narrative of that you can't change people's lives if you give them the right investments. We see it locally here with what Coss is doing on the Lower East Side, Mikey's Icy on the East Village. You have people who are changing people's lives, but no one is using that data of how many people they're changing to push back on the narrative that we're so used to.
So, I mean, data is very key, right? We need it in pretty much everything. It's driving the force of what we're doing in our day-to-day lives. So, how do you think we need to start collecting a bit more of that information so we have more positive stories to tell that would probably get more people involved in trying to, support this cause? Yeah,
and it's something that should be easy to do, right? We have parole officers who should be keeping track of employment opportunities, whether they return back to the system or not. There's ways to follow up with people. Corporations do it all the time. Universities do it all the time. They want to know where their alumni go so they can promote it, right? Like, we should be able to have that same system to track how we improve people's lives after they're incarcerated.
Great, thank you for that.
I also think that, so Katie and I have a anchor partner, Loeb Enterprises, which is standing up a venture called Steady. And Steady is focused on the gig economy. And as many as 70–80% of people in the gig economy are Black and brown folk. These are folks who, aren't W-2 employees, don't have frequently a bi-weekly paycheck that you can then build a credit profile around. But these are decent income earners. Many of them are impacted, but they're shut out of lending and credit instruments and a world of opportunity. These aren't, people that would traditionally receive, pre-approval on a mortgage, a credit card. And so, the financial institutions really need a giant rethink because of data, that would show, this impacted man or woman who's been driving for Uber, they're actually pulling down, a pretty decent wage. Coss, for example, leads a venture. If his data points are his social media, where you see classes filled with people and he's running a robust business, that should be a data point, that a lender could lend to a Coss against. And so I just think that it's incumbent upon the corporations with these tools around data and metrics and evaluation to do a much more robust job to extend greater opportunity to the most vulnerable amongst us. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I really want to get to kind of understanding more about the link between Defy. And as it's Giving Tuesday, we want to give back to our audience and give them some actions to take away from this. But before we do that, coming to you, Coss, just around the connection you have with Defy and the impact that they've had for yourself.
I can't talk enough about the impact that I got from Defy. I mean, it was just crazy to have a program when I came home and really believe in me when even my family didn't believe in me. I remember when Chris told me and I came home, he was like, when people would, and Chris graduated with a financial degree, went into finance, and my sister did as well, and they would not even talk about me. They would deny that they had another brother. They wouldn't even mention it to anybody, and it was because I was going back and forth into prison, and that was the lifestyle I was living. And so when I came home, I told them I found this program, I'm gonna start this company, and they were like, I don't know about this, and they were like very skeptic about what I was doing. And then it was not until I had them come to a Defy event where they became true believers, and they were like, wow, this program really is doing something. I learned a whole bunch of hard skills like Excel and emails and everything I needed to learn in terms of business and how to read a balance sheet and P&Ls and all that stuff. But it was the family reunification that really changed me and really changed my idea of a program, because I've tried different nonprofit organizations, but there was no other nonprofit organization where I could text at 10 at night when I had trouble with my homework, and they were quick to respond and be on it because somebody cared. There's not a lot of, I haven't really seen programs like that. And I've took advantage and tried to take advantage of a lot of nonprofit organizations, but I haven't seen, any other nonprofit organization in the criminal justice space work as hard as Defy Ventures, and really care about their work. So, I mean, I'm gonna contribute like every year I do, and I hope everybody here, has the means to contribute on this Giving Tuesday as well.
Thank you. Well, we have 1 minute left. I want to thank you guys for joining, and for the panelists for such an insightful and engaging conversation. We really appreciate you and the information that you shared with us today. So for our audience, we do want to leave you with some takeaways on how you can take action on this day, Giving Tuesday. So we have, firstly, just to highlight the existing corporate partners that we have. So this is a combination of funders, program partners, and employee partners. And you can also join us on this journey as well. So whether looking at an individual or corporate volunteering opportunities that will be available, please also look at ways of supporting Defy's programming with financial contributions. And we're really pleased to announce that we are kicking off our Wire-thon today with a goal of raising $50,000 before the end of the year. And to help us meet this, we are excited to say that one of our amazing corporate partners, Dr. Bronner's, will be matching all gifts towards that goal. They are also, between today and midnight Pacific time, the first 10 people who commit to being a monthly donor or who increase their existing monthly commitments will receive a special gift pack from them and of their products. So please be up for the running in that. And you can also make donations or monthly contributions by clicking the link that's in our chat right now. If you want to become a employer partner, please do contact us around that. Or if you want to host a fair chance hiring workshop at your company, again, Stephanie Strzok's email is in the chat to connect and get that running. So once again, thank you ever so much for supporting this organization and for all the work that you guys do. Thank you to our panelists. Enjoy the rest of your day.